What is up, everybody? Jester here, and welcome back for Perma Death Day 2. In today's episode, we're going to be working on our base computer through going and getting some chromatic metal through copper. We're also going to be continuing to look through caves because we're needing to get some oxygen to get that under control. We're also going to be doing scans for units and nanites, as well as jumping around for some inventory slots. Tons we're going to get into, so let's get started. Picking up right where we left off, we were heading out for copper, but as we were going out to look for copper, I wanted to make sure that we were looking for oxygen. This was the only resource we were really deficient on because we just couldn't find it in very big packs. And in Perma Death, you don't get a lot of plants together. So just be sure that you're checking for this early and often, because oxygen is going to come in big handy, not only for life support, but for some other recipes as you're going forward. So as you're out exploring, just keep looking for this. Grab it every time you see it. When you do find your copper deposit, a little word of warning, make sure your terrain manipulator is turned down, especially if you like to use shoulder boost, because it will tear up your copper deposit and you're not going to get nearly the resources out of it as if you've got the tighter mining beam for your terrain manipulator. So just make sure it's as small as possible to get you the max value out of these small deposits, and that way you'll be able to not have to come out and do it multiple times over. Another thing you can do as you're out looking around for your copper is, if you come across another resource deposit, go ahead and grab it because we can sell it. In this case, it's cobalt, and it's not nearly as valuable as it used to be. It's been nerfed into the ground. You used to be able to crash the market and make a lot of money. With these stack sizes, it isn't going to work. But look, every little penny helps when it comes to permadeath, especially in the beginning, or really any difficulty for that matter. As you work your way back towards where you're going to make your base, it's really important to continue to check for caves. Now, we covered this in part 1, but humming sacks, these are worth quite a bit per stack. You might find the relics that are down here that are less money, but they're still valuable. This is also the point where you want to start looking for salvage data. You're going to need a ton of this going forward to get certain things once we reach the anomaly. And just trust me, the quicker you get on this, the better off it's going to be for you in the long run, because it's probably the longest grind of the entire game. When you get back to your location for your base, go ahead and put your refiner down and start getting your copper turned into chromatic metal. Now, it's a 2-to-1 ratio on this, so you're going to need to have at least 60 copper to make the 30 chromatic metal you need for your base. But while this is cooking, we can do some other things. In the last one, I showed you that I picked up the recipe for the advanced mining laser a little bit early because it was kind of cheap. And although it's going to hit our pocketbook quite a bit, I'm going to go ahead and purchase a couple of wiring looms because it's really all we need to go ahead and get this installed. Now in our adventures, if we happen to see runaway mold or a bigger resource, we can go ahead and pick that up as we see it, get it refined into nanites, and or we can get pure ferrite for free instead of having to refine it. It's just a good thing to do, even though it costs us some early money. Now that we've got our chromatic metal all refined, it's time to go ahead and set down your first base computer. Now, there's going to be a thing you have to do once you claim the base, and there's a reason why I chose this minor settlement. It's because it's got a landing pad, a galactic terminal, all that good stuff. But now we're kind of in a much better spot, so if we don't get our building built in time, we can always go inside and wait for the storm to pass. But as soon as you re-interact with the base computer, you're going to get the recipe for the most basic of build pieces, which is going to be just the wood pieces, walls, flooring, roof, very, very simple stuff. And all you have to do from there is just build you a small little cube. And I like to put it really close to the base computer so I can actually access the computer from inside the building while we're safe and still continue the story and not worry about having hazard protection be a thing going forward. Sporadically, the base computer is going to tell you, hey, we've got these archives that we want you to look at. And you want to do these about as quick as you can because it's going to further the story on fairly quickly, but it's also going to give you different recipes and things for things like what we're getting now, the construction research unit. And this is going to be where we're going to spend that first salvage data. And this is why I told you guys it's really important as you're already out to be looking for these things that are in the way instead of having to go out and make a separate trip. This is just going to be a little more efficient, a way to do it. You don't need a ton of this in the beginning, but like I said a minute ago, it's probably the longest grind in the game if you want to get everything unlocked. But that's going to be at the anomaly, and that's going to be later, and that's going to be for another episode, actually the next episode, because we're not going to get everything, but we're going to get a lot of things. So we're going to be out looking for a ton of salvage data going forward. But in this case, we were able to go ahead and unlock both the base teleport module and the biofuel reactor, and a few other things, including the battery, but not everything that was available. From there, you want to go ahead and start getting your teleport module put together. You can see here it's really some basic resources. You need a metal plating, so that ferrite dust that we've been crafting down from the rusted metal comes in big handy here. And then we also want to go ahead and get the biofuel reactor down. Now, the biofuel reactor is actually kind of a cool item. It's renewable if you've got the carbon, but the thing about it is a full load of 120 carbon gives you like 50 hours of fuel. That's actual real time. So over 2 full real life days where this portal will be active without having to recharge it. And that's pretty cool. From there, the base computer is going to tell you, hey, this is all we've got. You're going to have to go to the space station. And then you finally get the prompt to get off the planet. From here, we're able to take off from the landing pad, which is another reason why we chose this minor settlement. And we're able to take off and head up to the space station where we're actually going to be able to do some very useful things. The first thing you want to do is interact with, I believe it's 3 aliens. The third one's going to finally tell you, hey, this is the code that you're going to need for your base computer, blah, blah, blah. And that will advance the storyline. But there is some other things that we want to look at while we're here because they're going to help us advance even further. The first thing is I wanted to check out the multi-tool. And in this case, it's a B class. It's not that great. But when I go in and looked at it, I realized it's actually pretty affordable and it's got quite a few more slots than ours does. So I went ahead and picked this up, but I did go ahead and store the technology for both my terrain manipulator and my advanced mining laser because I did not want to buy the parts for those twice. But at least we got a slightly better multi-tool. Before you leave the station to head back down to your base computer to start getting this figured out, I do a couple of things. I make sure I go get my exosuit slot from the exosuit vendor, and I talk to all the different aliens and request dialect help. And there's a pretty big reason for that. In No Man's Sky, there are 90 different milestones that you can get. And in order to complete the game, that is beating the Artemis path and the Atlas path, you need to get 55. So we need to figure out our path to 55, which is why we are talking to everybody in the stations, and we'll show you that here in just a second. But these are fairly easy to get. It's just a matter of kind of working on them a bit. Things like on-foot exploration. You're going to get this as you play the game. The one we've been working on, alien encounters. We can go all the way up to 80, and you'll get 10 milestones out of that. Also, you can double down with the words collected, as I mentioned, all the way up to 150. So when you see the little cylinder things that are on the planets, go interact with those because you're going to get a word for each one of those that you find as you're doing your exploration. And there's tons of other ones, and we're going to talk more about these later, but units secured, sentinel ships destroyed, extreme survival, space exploration, planetary zoology, there'll be a trick to that. But just know that when you start working on these pretty quickly, this is where you want to go. And as I said, you need to get to 55 to be able to do the final part of the Atlas path. That will give you the Galileo milestone, and then you won't have any troubles from there. When you're all finished up on the space station, head back down to your base and re-interact with your base computer. This is going to point you in the direction of a hyperdrive recipe. So all you have to do is fly over to there and get the recipe and install it. And then from there, the game is going to continue to point you in certain directions. You need to be able to go and get the recipe for the warp cells. And then you have to be able to craft those. So just know this is going to take a little bit of time and you're going to need some resources to do it. But this is where the game really starts to take off because now you can actually go and explore the galaxy. After you do make your first jump, you're going to get some new starship guidance. It's going to point you in this direction of a fuel source. It's basically going to be a free warp cell that's just going to help you along the way. Remember, our resources are extremely limited and our stack sizes are tiny. So any little bit of help we can get is awesome, and you kind of have to do it anyway. So just go ahead and get it done, get the warp cell, put it in, and then head back to the space station. From there, it's rinse and repeat. Talk to every alien, request dialect help. I wouldn't worry about any of the other interactions with these guys, like practicing your language. None of that, or the gifts or anything else. We'll have to deal with that later. But this is going to get you where you want to go on the milestones. And also, don't forget to go and get your exosuit slot every system you're in. Eventually, we'll be able to get 2 at a time once we get the anomaly, but that's not quite where we're at yet. Once back out in space, you're going to get directed to Artemis himself. This is really where the Artemis questline picks up, and you are going to be able to claim his ship if you would so like. It's usually a C-class, and it's broken as hell, and I'm actually going to show you guys something that's a little bit weird with how they do this, so you might want to even think about putting down a save beacon, because if you don't fix the ship, you got pretty big problems. for the sake of science, I went ahead and claimed the ship and left it unrepaired and flew to the space station thinking, okay, now that the new mechanic is you can call it in, we'll just call the ship in and then we'll sell it from there. It'll save us a ton of resources. The funny thing here is it doesn't. It won't move because it's critically damaged. So now I have no way to go back and find that random place on the planet. I have a ship that I'll never be able to get to in my inventory again. I think this is a bit of an oversight from Hello Games, but hey, don't fall into this trap. After completing this portion of the quest line, you are granted access to the space anomaly, and we're going to talk about that in detail in the next episode, where to find everything and what to do while you're here. But for now, just know that that's when you get it, and we'll come back to it. One last thing that I'd like to mention about space stations before we end today's episode is the encrypted navigation data that you can find floating around here. It's not as prevalent as it used to be, but you can take this over to the cartographer, and what I like to do is grab the emergency cartographic data chart. This is going to lead you to an emergency beacon. Sometimes this is a spaceship, sometimes it's something else, but in this case we find a nice hauler. It is a C-class. It's probably not going to be as maneuverable as the ship that we have, but it does have another use. So go ahead and fix not only the pulse drive, but the launch thrusters, and then you're going to take it up to the space station, and we're going to salvage it. And the funny part about salvaging this thing is it's only worth about 3 million units, but that's enough to get you your level 10 milestone for units made. Believe it or not, that's going to get you 10 milestones straight away. So we're already making really good progress when it comes down to this. So definitely think about doing this. Heck, you might even find a ship that you want to fly around and be your forever ship for the entire run. We covered a ton of ground today for No Man's Sky and just overall gameplay. Yes, this is Perma Death, but it applies to any mode you're playing. You still kind of want to attack it the same way. And hopefully, even for you new players, this is helpful. And if it is, like the video and subscribe, because I got tons more coming, including tons more creative builds in the Kingdom system. And it's just going to be a blast. But until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon. Bye.